Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today's episode is a really interesting one because you're going to hear from two doctors who just met on the show. And they're both building exceptional practices, but in very different ways. My guests today are Dr. David Moore and Dr. Julia Zayden. And as the conversation unfolds, it becomes very clear to me that while they share a commitment to high quality care and using technology to elevate the patient experience, their philosophies for how to run and grow a business are actually quite different and almost from the core. And that's actually what makes this episode so interesting, because when we get into how they structure the exam, how they think about the pace and patient relationships, how they use technology as part of the conversation, not just as a tool, but really as part of the patient experience, how this translates to trust and treatment acceptance. We also talk about how they think about hiring, consistency across doctors, what it really takes to scale a practice, and a lot of mindset around how you build a business and what makes the whole concept of entrepreneurship really special. And then we zoom out into growth, adding locations, building new exam lanes, bringing on associates, and some very honest lessons that they've learned along the way. I also want to mention that the episode is sponsored by Advancing Eye Care as part of their practice spotlight effort, kind of highlighting regular optometrists that are doing extraordinary things in practice. But I think this conversation is a perfect example of that, which is a very organic conversation without a whole lot of any sales pitch or anything like that. Quick reminder before we start is make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen so that you don't miss any episodes. And as always, feel free to reach out to me with feedback, questions, or ideas on future shows at eugeneshatsman.com or the Power Hour website. And with that, let's go to today's episode. All right, David, Julia, welcome to the Power Hour. Excited to have you both on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to start this episode is just to get a little bit of background from each of you and your practice so that the audience has some context on each of your journeys. David, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit more about your practice journey.
Sure. So I graduated from U of H almost 20 years ago, and I think I got my license in June of 27 or 07, and then I opened up. I think I saw my first patient in my. I just hung a shingle and started a practice, and I think I saw my first patient September 1 of 2007 in my own office, and threw together some. We were in an old dental office, and changed it to a optometric practice. And my patients, I just had one today comment on the old house that I used to practice in. So I thought I'd be there for like 2 years, and I was there for 10. So I'm now sitting in our new office. I started this office about 18 years ago, 19, I guess going on 19. And so it's a 2-doctor practice, sometimes 2.5 to 3, depending on kind of what we have going on and what associates are with us. And then I have another practice that's 8 years old, and one we just acquired a couple of years ago. So I've got 3 practices. They're all in various stages of growth and maturity, and actually in totally different settings. So one's in rural. The first one was rural. The second one was in the second 2 are in the city, 2 different cities. So
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah. And I still see patients about 40 hours a week.
Got it. And across your 3 locations, how many total ODs do you have?
We have 3. We're looking for a 4th. So
Got it. Yep. You're certainly not alone. I'm sure many in the audience can relate.
That's a struggle for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that, maybe some of the other challenges as you had expanded. Julia, what about your story? Give us a little bit of background and some context.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. When I started Pine Vision Care, I wasn't thinking about having like multi-locations or anything big. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and having my own practice has always been in the background. But the real turning point was when I graduated and I tried different settings of optometry. I worked at the VA, multi-locations, ophthalmology locations, corporates. And I just realized that something just didn't feel right, and it felt a little bit more transactional. There were some limitations. And that's when I realized that I wanted to create my own practice, and not just to practice optometry, but rather create an environment where I can deliver the care that I believe in. And that's how Pine Vision Care was born. And it's been about 8 years at this point. And I expanded to 2 locations about 2 years ago. We are in center Philadelphia, our first location, and then a little bit suburbs, mainline in Newtown Square for our second location.
Got
We're
it.
about 4 doctors total, 2 full-time, 2 part-timers. Yeah.
Got it. Great. And when you said you wanted to deliver a different flavor of patient care than you had experienced from a corporate standpoint or in some of the other settings that you practiced in, go a little bit deeper and define that just a little bit more, Julia.
Oh, yes. I think it's all about the pace, right? So the pace been so challenging where patients are scheduled every 15 to 20 minutes. Like, what can you learn in that small amount of time? Just like nothing. Um, you need slow down and dig a little bit deeper to learn what kind of problems patients have and learn about their lifestyle and how they use their eyes. And I realized a lot of times patients don't even know how to explain what's going on with their eyes. So you truly need to spend more time and figure it out.
Yeah.
So
So
that's mhm.
do you find that spending more time with patients tends to lead to a greater level of trust or maybe more a higher value of patient in general in terms of how much they spend in your practice?
100%. It's I guess when I wanted to this practice environment, it's not just about going through your checkpoints and then prescribing glasses, right? You learning a lot more how people use their eyes, and then you provide like real solutions, like solutions to the problems that patients have. And when you spend more time with the patient, when you listen to them, it certainly builds the trust, yeah, and it's a better flow, and patients are more likely to proceed with the treatment and get the better outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to come back to this because one of my challenges that I've heard people talk about a lot is how you, the owner, can provide a certain experience for your patients, but how do you get your associates to do that? So we'll come back to you on that point, Julia. But David, I want to turn it over to you and maybe you comment a little bit on what's the flavor of care that you tend to deliver in your offices, and is it consistent across all three, or is the bigger one different than the other two? You mentioned one's in a rural setting, one's and the other ones are in city. So just talk a little bit about that and how you all deliver eye care services.
Yeah, I think for the most part they're similar. We tried to create so I've and I started three just to kind of go back because I enjoy the process and running a practice, kind of the overarching ideas and themes and how we care for patients and how we want it to look, but I don't enjoy middle management. So I was trying to grow out of, when you're small enough, you kind of have to see patients. You can't focus on that as well as you should. Um, and so we've tried to grow enough to where we have some managers over that are underneath me that do run operations, and in that we try to systematize everything across locations to where all the doctors are functioning in the same way. So whereas where one doctor isn't having a patient worked up a different way than the other, and it's not all just dictated from me. We try to say, hey, look, if you see a problem or we want to do something differently, uh, then let's all change the way we're doing it. Or if there's a new instrument out, or however, whatever it is, we try to do it all the same. And that's just continuity of care. I practice in all offices for the most part, and so I can get an idea of kind of how things are going that way, and how associates are practicing. But what we've learned is, if we want everyone to be offering the highest care, we kind of have to hire that doctor that wants to do that. um because you can that from school, the associates are trained to provide good care, but they may not do it, and kind of have a basic knowledge, but they may not have the same relationship building skills. And I think that takes in my rural location, it takes time to build relationships, and so those we've had more time there, and so those relationships are deeper. Patients know me, I know them. Same with my associates. The longer they're with me, the more they build those relationships. And so, it's not this, hey, we're selling you something. It's we trust you. We want to do business with you. One of my mentors said, People have to like you to want to do business with you." And I find that so true, and not like this fake idea, but of kind of who you are, or this misrepresentation, but kind of a genuine relationship. And so we try to really kind of foster that across all of our locations and get our doctors to understand that the care that we're providing, and the kind of more personalized, specific care that we do, it's all built on relationships. So the patient's got to know you, and you.
So let's go to some of the specifics. So what are the kinds of things that you do, and how many patients do you see per hour? Are all
Yep.
your associates
We
the
we
same?
we
And what?
everyone's the same. Yep. So we try to standardize that too. We have our techs currently that they don't refract. They do contact lens progs, but we do 3 patients an hour, and then we do one progress visit. So whether that's a pressure check or dry eye visit or contact lens prog, that goes in a
Mhm.
10-minute spot. And then
Got
we
it.
try to offload as much of that onto our staff as we can. So we do lots of testing. So we do mammography on everyone. We do Optimap on everyone. Topography on anybody that has astigmatism. So all those things, and then it streamlines our exam. We do the dry eye questionnaire prior to. So a lot of those things are done, and then that way when we get into the room, we can kind of analyze everything.
Yeah. Okay. And the conversations with the patients, I heard Julia say that it's tough when you're really time constrained to have a super high quality conversation. So how have you standardized your conversations with patients if you're saying your associates are doing something similar than you are? And then how do you hold to that standard? Are you observing your associates? Are you and really, what's that patient experience that you're trying to go for?
Yeah, I think so. I read reviews. I don't observe the unless I'm just in with an associate on a day that they're there. I don't observe them, but I have a manager that does. My operations manager that's over all my practices. She's in touch with all those. So I kind of operate like a regular associate and just seeing patients, and then in my free time I kind of do some of those managerial things. But from a day-to-day basis, she's doing all of that, so she knows kind of how I want it to go. She knows how I do it, and then she's trying to get the other doctors to um and it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but even recently we have started since we started doing OptiLight and OptiLift, we started encouraging our doctors to pull up my mammography first. So you tend to get the most patient attention whenever you're at the beginning of the exam, right? So after refraction, and that's kind of rattling to some patients, or makes them nervous, and then they aren't as focused. So we try to get my mammography and Optimap, all those kind of topography, all those images that we're doing in front of the patient first. And so just from a standpoint of kind of organization of the exam, we we don't make the doctors do that, but it's encouraged. Let's all try to do it the same way, because there's got to be a most efficient way to do this, or at least in the way we do it.
Okay, perfect. So, Julia, back to you. Now, maybe you comment on you're talking about building relationships with patients and having kind of a meaningful conversation. What is your process? What's your patient experience? And how do you keep your associates consistent?
So we try to be, I guess, very intentional how we schedule, right? So we do not overbook. We see about 2 patients per hour, and majority of that time is spent with the doctor. There are no texts. We all like to do our own pre-testing, and that's the time where you start learning about patients' needs. And I love that fact. If we grow bigger, maybe we'll use some text, but for now it works out actually really, really well. And as you're doing the pre-testing, you actually already learning, you're listening to the patient, and you're coming up with a plan and what's going to be next for this exam. For the associates, how do I keep everyone on the same? I think it starts with really hiring the right doctors to join the practice. That's like number one step. Um, we hire for personality, really, because doctors, we all graduate from similar schools and we have similar skills, but personality, what makes it different, and then the goals that the doctors have. So we all very, very similar to each other. And then the way we practice. And then as far as the tools, they're the same tools and equipment through both locations. So everyone kind of goes through the same flow. I typically train everyone on how we do things here at Pine Vision Care, and it's like weekly meetings we do to make sure everything is done properly. Um, yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. What are the biggest wow moments where when patients say wow during your exam? Like, give me a couple examples that really kind of stand out in your mind.
Yes. And we can tighten this up with the technology, right, that we have in the office that allows us to have those wow moments for the patients. For example, it's the integrated slit lamp with the camera integrated slit lamp. And when I show the patients their meibomian glands, their eyes in focus and up close, they always wowed by that. They say that they've never seen anything like that before. No one ever explained it the way we explain it to them. Um, Whenever we do still optos, so the picture of the back of the eyes, and I zoom in, I play a little video when you go through the pupil and you see the retina, so that's another vow. Well, a lot of times that's a vow moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and when patients see these things, so for example, let's talk about the meibomian gland component. And does that lead to a higher treatment acceptance on something like a dry eye treatment? And what is your treatment acceptance rate for things like dry eye?
Absolutely. Whenever the patient sees, so we can talk about what's going on with the eye, but when we can show it to them, it makes the patient understand it a lot better, right? And in general, the flow of the exam becomes more seamless. You going from, because I feel like in traditional optometry, everything is so kind of like fragmented. You do one test and another device, and then you manually um, putting the recordings in the computer. But when you have an integrated system, it's a better flow for patients. It's a seamless exam, and definitely the trust goes up, and the acceptance of the treatment goes up as well.
Got it. And do you know your treatment acceptance rate or your capture rates in either treatments or in your optical?
As far as the optical, so like with contact lenses and then the glasses sales, so we are about 80%. We're a little bit higher than I think than the average. We're about 80% for contact lenses conversion rates, and then the glasses at about 50% currently, something that we're working on. With the dry eye and specialty treatments like myopia, typically people find us already. They either are referred to us, or they've been, majority of people actually are being referred. So the conversion rate for treatment, it's actually quite high. So for people who are already suffering and then they've been referred specifically to us for either dry eye treatment or for myopia management.
So, David, has specialty been a big part of your growth over the last few years?
Yeah, for sure over the last year. Yeah. I would say from COVID kind of forward, we were, we would grow like 3 to 5% a year. And then last year, we really kind of made a big push to implement technology, whether it's the AL myopia or the OptiLight and OptiLift to really implement those, get our processes down, get everyone trained on it. And that's been probably a 6-month process. And now I think we have like a 3-week waiting list for our Optilight and Lift, and then we do those in all 3 practices. Right now, I have the same staff member that we've trained. She takes the equipment to each office, so we haven't purchased new, individual equipment for each office yet, but that's working really well. And I think probably for a larger location, last I looked, we were up uh, 10 to 15%. And then in February, when it seemed like really January, February is when some of those, the, our treatment plan and was fully implemented. And I want to say for February, we're up like 18%. And for a larger practice, I mean, that's like great growth. I couldn't ask for anything more than that. So
And you're saying your dry eye program is driving a lot of that growth?
yeah, yeah. And we were fortunate enough to get your opticians obviously make or break your optical and your optical sales. I mean, the doctors, right? You got to prescribe from the chair and all that, but between the handoff and all those things, you still have to have very competent opticians. And so we were fortunate to get some really great opticians here recently, and so that immediately we saw our capture rate go up by about 10%.
Okay,
And
so let's go through your numbers, and then I want to kind of circle back to your point about 3-week wait list for your dry eye program. So let's start with optical capture rate, and then maybe treatment acceptance rate for some of your specialties.
yeah, so historically in our rural clinic, we've been like, and it goes up and down. So if I hire a consultant or I have a great optician at the time, we're over 50%, and then and then we kind of baseline to about 45% capture rate, and that's not lens capture rate, that's full frame. So our lens capture rate is closer to 60%.
Okay,
We
so you have
just
a lot
don't.
of lens onlys.
Yeah, yeah. So we are right now we're over 50% in just complete pair capture rate. But and then contact lens, we're over 50%, but we're still probably behind a lot of people. We're 50% daily, 50% monthly or weekly. And then our city locations, we've got very experienced opticians that we've had for a long time that are career opticians. And so those capture rates are 60%.
Okay.
So
So
we're
what about
industry.
your specialty treatment plan?
Um,
The specialty acceptance rates.
I think we're probably 30% at this point. Um, and I would tell anybody that's doing that, it's really hard to until you kind of get your flow down and understand, like, okay, what do we really include as a capture, and who is our defined audience of, hey, we're presenting this, and did we capture that? I'm gonna say it takes a year, takes
Yeah.
at least 9 months to figure out all those things. And so we're new to some of that. Like really being able to nail down our capture rate, that's just kind of a anecdotal. I feel like we're probably about there just based on our weight, and that kind of when we started stacking patients up that needed extra treatment. But I would tell you that our y- socioeconomics is a big driver for like those higher end or more expensive treatment plans for OptiLight and Lift, and also myopia control. And but it's interesting. Our One of our city practices and our rural practice have the same uh, average or about the same average household income, and our rural practice is far more accepting to the treatment plans that we present. Um, just because of the relationship that we have with them. In the city, it's just harder to have those relationships because it's there's more competition. Optometry is more of a it could be commodity to some degree, just with all the opticals and all of it. So rural, it definitely is easier to capture for sure on
Well,
treatment.
That's an interesting observation. I've often heard the opposite, which is that, hey, in our rural practices, we have a harder time capturing because those patients only come in when they absolutely need something, or those patients tend to be more price sensitive, regardless of average household income. But it's interesting that you're saying you have a better relationship with them, and therefore you actually have a higher capture rate. So, what is in I'm just curious about some of your learnings, because you said you guys just deployed this dry eye program, or you just got good at it. So, what are the kinds of mistakes that you made along the way? And what are the kinds of things that you're like, if I were to start over and I were to offer someone a shortcut to like do it right the first time, what are the kinds of things that you wouldn't have done? And what are the kinds of things that you do now in your dry eye program that are kind of that kind of bypass some of those mistakes?
Yeah, I think implementation and like a realistic expectation of how long it's going to take to really kind of get that snowball. It's just like a snowball because it's almost like an annuity in the fact that people need continued treatment, right? And it works. So and so we are confident we don't really shy away from offering the treatment. It's kind of like our first line of therapy now, and so patients are starting to learn about it. Maybe they said, "Hey, I don't want to do it this year, but I'll do it next." And so we're kind of seeing it in a long term fashion where we're going to educate patients on it, and if they do decide to pass on it, we're still going to talk about it the next year because we still believe it's the best treatment. But it takes a while. It's going to take. Really, you should plan 3 months before your implementation of I'm going to start gathering patients. We're going to make lists. I'm going to start educating them. I'm going to send them emails on new technology that we're bringing in that could help their problem, and then it's going to take probably 3 months of really figuring out how do we work this into our practice um flow, because it takes a long time to do the screenings, and then for patients to come back on varying intervals. Just our tech, we've realized, like, okay, it's best for the person that's doing our treatments to also kind of control that schedule. And so we've made little changes along that time. And I would say, really, we started looking at the technology this time last year. We had it brought in 3 months later, whenever it started becoming more available, with production kind of issues from COVID, and then um, or whatever was, I think it was supply chain problems, and then they got rolling, so we brought it in, and then really kind of 9 months later, we feel like we're in good footing. It's comfortable. It's almost like we've been doing it a long time. So
Yeah, and then
I
and
think preparation and in advance, a system, and then being willing to like modify it and change it over, like really kind of analyzing how's it going and then making those changes over a 6 month period. And if somebody does that, it's already, ours is already paying for ourselves, itself. So that, but for probably 3 to 6 months, you're gonna, that payment that you make is, you're gonna eat that, whether it's
no,
your.
unless like you said, you kind of get started ahead of time, and you say, I'm going to start the planning ahead of time, start the patient education ahead of time, and then by the time it makes sense to have our first payment, I've already made. And I think one of the big things you said is the providers need to be super confident in it and need to feel like this is the right thing to do for the patient, and not try to manage the patient's wallet, right? And try to more manage the patient's eye health. And so that makes perfect sense to me. Um, I think both of you have talked about technology. Let's get specific. So, Julia, you had talked about technology being a core differentiator in your exam. Why don't you just tell me what technology you have in your office? And you recently opened your second office. Like, what is the technology that you rely on day to day, and how do you use it, and why did you select that technology?
Yeah, so with the technology for me has always been something that improves patients' experience in the office. So when we first started the first practice, I wanted to have that seamless integration, right? From the patient comes in, we check in their glasses, we check in their auto refracting measurements, and then we're doing the optimap. And then this is, by the way, another wow moment is when you take the little card, right? Like the Marco card, and you put it in your phoropter, and all those tick, 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 all those numbers go into the machine, and people are like, wow, like it went from the pre-testing room to the exam room, and it's all there, it's on the computer. So they've been wowed by that, and that also makes just things so much easier, right? And so much a much better flow. So that's to start with, that something very simple. And then when you're transferring the data from your machine to the computer to their chart, and then you're able to show what the current prescription is, touch of a button, you compare it with a new prescription. So that's just like little things like that makes a difference for the patient. And like I said, it builds the trust, better outcomes. We also have the slit lamp that has integrated camera. So this live recording made a huge difference for us. So as I'm recording, and then the patients can see their big eyeballs on the big monitor, and then I can go in and show everything in detail. I can play the video, I can take pictures. So yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's a big part of why the patient chooses to come to you, is that there's a high touch, high technology, and it also sounds like your exam is very visual. Let me show you, let me explain to you, let me play the video for you, that kind of thing. Um, David, do you have a similar experience as do you guys do a lot of
Yeah,
show and tell during your exams?
for sure. Yeah, we kind of have the same. Um, we follow the same ideology of, if I'm looking at it, I show the patient. So Optimap. So what we do, Optimap, mapomography, um, OCT, all of those things are piped into the exam room topography. Um, and so we'll pull all that up and go over everything, explain all those details. And quite honestly, it's an easy differentiator from somebody that's doing. And I would obviously, between Julia and I, our volume's different, right? And kind of some different ideas there, but we still use the same um, ideas for using technology and showing patients or educating patients. I think the patient education aspect is really kind of the first concept of relationship, because then they know, because everybody's doing it. It's not like ODs or eye ophthalmologists, optometrists are not looking at those things, right? They're just not maybe explaining it or showing it to the patient. And so I think that's just an easy differentiator of kind of trying to build that relationship and trust and answering questions and slowing down a little bit to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because um, once I was with a colleague when she was doing a um, kind of a secret shopper slash practice consulting visit. And one of the things I observed is that the doctor is looking at a 17-inch screen or an 18-inch screen or something relatively small
Mhm.
when they're talking, when they're reviewing, and it's the same screen. It's got the chart, it's got the imaging, and even if they were to turn that screen to the patient, it's also small and kind of silly. It sounds like, Julia, you've got like a big screen that you're showing the patient.
I
Yes.
have a big monitor, and then Senesit is a small office. So in the city spaces are tinier, so the patient can literally see the big screen right there. They can just turn their head. And Newtown Square location is a little bit bigger space, so I actually bring the chair to my desk. I sit them right here, and then I blow things up right on the big. I don't know how many inches is that. 50. The big screen, so they can see everything. And yeah, absolutely. It's just education is a huge aspect. It's just like when each of us, right, we go to the doctor, like I want to understand what they're talking about. And I remember like majority of the time, just you listen and then it just doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. But when you show it to you, it's like, okay, that makes sense. I think it's just making sense. I think that's my philosophy. Everything has to make sense. And then I constantly ask my patients, does that make sense? Like, can you visualize it? Are we on the same page? And they'd really appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. When we come back after the break, I'm going to ask each of you about your experience of the opening the new locations or adding locations and kind of some of the technology decisions that went into that. So we'll be right back on the Power Hour.
Here's a question every independent practice owner is wrestling with right now. In a market this uncertain, what does it actually take to build a practice that lasts? Economic pressure on independent optometry is real. Patients are more cost conscious than ever, staffing is harder, and technology decisions made at the wrong time with the wrong partner can set a practice back years. The practices winning right now have one thing in common. They stopped treating their technology partner as a vendor and found a partner. Advancing Eye Care is the largest ophthalmic technology and service organization in North America. But what makes them different isn't scale, it's approach. Before they recommend a single piece of equipment, they start with a business analysis of your practice, your workflow, your patient mix, your revenue model. They'll tell you exactly what you need and what you don't. Their service team, the largest on the continent, doesn't wait for things to break. They're proactive, fast response, and built around a simple reality. Downtime costs you patience. When it's time to invest in technology, they structure financing around your ramp up, and they stay with you long after the sale. The two doctors you're listening to on today's show, both building exceptional practices, both making smart technology decisions, both with the right support behind them. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Advancing Eye Care as part of their Practice Spotlight series because they believe the most powerful case for partnership isn't made in a sales pitch. It's made by your peers. When you're ready to stop buying equipment and start building a practice, visit advancingeyecare.com.
We're back on the Power Hour. Julia, David, thank you for being here. And I want to talk about learnings with second location, third location, and in general, how you made decisions as you open these locations. So, um, Julia, I'll start with you. And it seems like you have an interesting business model, and I'm curious, not just second location, but like your first OD hire, and then expanding your OD team, because it seems like in your practice the ODs do a lot, and they deliver a higher level of care, but they also deliver that, but they also, it sounds like they do their own teching. They handle kind of all aspects of that patient visit. So how did you decide to hire your first optometrist, in addition to your location? And then when did you decide you were ready to add another location? And kind of let's talk about that journey.
Yeah, great question. I'll start from the start. So when I opened the first practice, I had two little babies. So I had a toddler, my 2-year-old, and then my middle boy was just born. So I yeah, that was the beginning. And I worked a lot, and for about a year and a half, it was just me. And actually, in the beginning, I'll tell you what, it was me at the front desk, me at the exam room, and me at the optician, because I haven't done my first hire yet at that time. But a couple months in, I did. I brought in the first person that I interviewed and the first person that I hired. I learned the big lessons on hiring. I've never done it before, so I had to go through these challenges. And then, anyways, so I worked for about a year and a half on my own, and then the kids were growing up, and I wanted to spend more time with them. And I think at that time, I might have been already pregnant with my third kid. It was like, okay, this is the time for me to step out and to go on an official maternity leave, right? So I started. I don't know if I was just pushed to look for another doctor, and I wasn't sure if I'm gonna bring someone like part-time or full-time. But I started looking, and I hired another female doctor. And I was still trying to go to the practice, but then early on, I've noticed that the practice is able to grow and sustain and grow with the new doctor and me not being there. And even backtracked for that, when I started Pine Vision Care, the examples that I had around me were older practices with the doctors who worked in these practices for a very long time. Like they worked for 20, 30 years, and then they slowly started to bring an associate for their exit strategy. So I I didn't think that bringing a doctor, an associate doctor to a practice early on was an option. And I thought that I needed to be there and build it myself first before I bring someone in. So what happened was the doctor we hired, and not only the practice was able to survive, but the practice grew so much. And that was that neuron connection that I made in my brain that never left me. I was like, okay, this is possible. So not only that I was a doctor with my practice, now I became a business owner. I think that was actually that light bulb moment when I thought of myself as a business owner. And I even remember it was a I think it was one of the seminars, and I was a speaker, and I prepared a speech about me being self semi-retired. That's what I called myself. I thought in that moment that I was very close to my retirement. It was so funny because the practice, I was just so happy because the practice was working. Someone else was working there. We were still getting amazing reviews. And here I am with my kids, and I was able to to stay home to take care of my kiddos while they were little. And I was wow, like that was such an amazing moment. And then that moment gave birth to the next neuron connection is what, okay, so how can I improve my business? How can I, how can I grow it now? So that's when I really started looking into, like the measurements and KPIs and systems and processes. Cause then I became a little bit more, I wanted more, like it was growing, but now I wanted more growth. And that's where my like business owner journey started. So
Yeah. And then the new location, what was it like opening that?
new location was a little bit different. New location is so close. First of all, it's so close to where I live. It's like within 10 minutes. So it's very easy for me to get to. And I'm still able to take my kids to school, pick them up, take them to their soccer and all the extra activities that they have. And then being able to, so I feel like I'm a little bit more in charge of my schedule here. And then I can even see patients, like on the fly. Like if someone wants to make an appointment, I'm available, I can always get to my practice within 10 minutes. So my front desk can call me and say, Dr. Zyrina, this patient wants to be seen. Can I bring them in an hour? It's like, sure, I'll be there. For this practice, I haven't brought an associate just yet, but I'm planning for it. And I brought another doctor who is a part-timer in Center City location. And then she wants to expand her days and hours with us. So honestly, soon, I probably think in next month, I will give her an extra day in this practice. And that's going to be the beginning of adding an associate to the second location.
Got it.
And,
Got it.
and there's also, there's also, I feel like there's like this psychological moment when you bring a new doctor, you feel like you need to bring more patients in. So,
100%. Yeah.
so that's going to push me. And that's something that works with me. I'm the one that's going to burn the boat to get somewhere. So I do that, but sometimes it works.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. David, you had a different journey. Talk a little bit about yours.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the old model of, and we're probably, I don't know, when did you graduate, Julia?
2015.
Okay, so we're probably just that enough of that different, probably I'm more in line with the old school versus the new school. We're just generationally a little bit different, and so
I
I plus
started
I,
late.
what's that?
I
Yeah.
started late.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I went into optometry. I was already, I think 26 or 27.
Okay. Yeah, I think I graduated when I was 27. But I kind of grew up in it. My dad was an optometrist, and so I had a lot of his old friends that were mentors. And so I kind of saw how they did it. And that was, hey, you're the producer, you grow it until you need somebody else, then you add somebody and you kind of grow that way. And so that's what I did. I worked for 7 years and kind of grinded that out, grew it, and was fortunate to be in a great location, good community that needed care. And so we grew pretty fast. I heard it was my wife and I first, and then I think we hired our first employee at 3 months, and then our second at 6 months, and then I think I paid myself first at 6 months, which is great. And talking about just efficiencies, obviously Julia is like really efficient, lower overhead. I think we have, I don't know, we may have like 22 staff members, 22
Mm,
to 25 staff members across locations. And so obviously I always have this idea of like, hey, there's got to be patients in the chair, and we need to be seeing patients. Somebody does all the time. And so when you have, and I do think, so we can talk about technology, and I do think as artificial intelligence starts taking over some of the pre-testing and some of the appointments and insurance type, like we will get more efficient in our front and back office sides, and it'll make the optometrist. I feel like for a while we'll continue to do what we're doing, but it'll help with our margins. And yeah, I think it's really interesting to contrast. Like I've got a huge staff, and Julia does equal care and kind of is a little more nimble. So yeah, so I took the other approach. We grew, hired more staff. As soon as you hire a doctor, you feel like you got to get busier because they're very expensive. And being in a smaller rural community, we're about an hour outside the city. There's not a lot of opportunity to hire a doctor for 1, 2, 3 days a week, and they may be like working somewhere else. So it's like a huge commitment. You're like all in 4 or 5 days a week. And of course, they're not going to be completely busy at first. But so in longevity in a smaller community matters. So when I talk to our new associates and say, hey, look, this isn't like, hey, you're going to come out and get some experience for a year or two and then go away like that. That's like worst case scenario for the practice. We really need you to commit, want to be here and stay. And so I do have a great doctor here that is been with me for 8 years, and she has her own patients. And so that allowed me, just having a really good foundation for a second doctor, allowed me to go start the other office. And I covered that one for a while. And that was a more expensive, I think when I first started my first practice, for the entire note was 250,000 for all the equipment, the building remodel. My rent was $2,000 a month. So it was fantastic. Now I think my build out for my second location was 700,000. I mean, just nuts.
That's just
And
the build up. And
uh,
then equipment and all that other stuff. So now
yes,
you got a big note to carry.
2 maybe for the second practice, and then you start up and try to cash flow all that stuff, and you're just kind of waiting on the turn. And unfortunately our turn was at COVID. So we're that practice is growing, getting there. I've got a good associate that patients alike, and so that's been good. But I did kind of go through the school of hard knocks, just more in line with COVID kind of issues, which I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to, especially if they've gotten out or tried to start an office in the last 3 or 4 years. So that was interesting. I learned a lot of things. I wish I had always had more cash. Uh, but then on the third practice, interestingly enough, this is kind of a sidebar. We had a mobile clinic. And so we saw like a lot of demand, and we started that unfortunately in 2019. And then everything, assisted living, independent living, we didn't do nursing home, but all of that shut down. So we kind of sidelined it, and I had to I was looking for space for my staff because I didn't want to have to lay a bunch of people off. And so anyway, we started that back up, and then and so that's kind of the impetus of why I needed a third practice, because we just ultimately decided, okay, we're gonna kind of shut that down, and then but I wanted to keep the staff. And so I bought another practice, and that one was a rehab. It had been a practice for 40, 50 years, 2 doctors that whole time. And and so that was interesting. I ended up buying that thinking the doctor would be around for probably a year. He ended up having some health issues and never stayed with us. So it was like that was another catch in like a lesson learned. When you buy a practice, you got to try to keep the doctor for a while. Otherwise, it just turns into kind of a semi startup. And so we're working through that. I've got a great associate now. We just moved locations, so changed the name, gone through all those things. So it's been so I've kind of learned 3 different lessons, like an initial low cost startup, a second kind of more high end expensive startup and then a rehab.
Is there a unifying, kind of an overarching unifying set of lessons across those three different scenarios?
Yeah, unless you're like independently wealthy, have a lot of cash or a good banker, you know, those and then I think, realistically, like I think if you walked in, like I have patients that go in between all of them, and our staff is the most key, right? Like, so having that customer friendly relational staff, where when the offices may look a little bit different, but when they can go in and get the same feeling. So like my first office is in what would be considered the cowboy capital of the world. It's what the town calls itself. And so a lot of Western lifestyle, you can imagine a lot of ranchers and, cattlemen, oil people, that kind of stuff. And so those patients they have a different lifestyle than my city patients. But yet my rural patients, when they can't see me in there, they'll sometimes go to my other location and they're like, this place is great. So I feel like when those patients, any of and then I've actually had city patients travel to my rural location, that's an hour away. And so when people will do that and they're like, yeah, this is great, I feel like we're doing a good job if the symmetry is and the customer service and that relational aspect is the same between the offices. Because obviously I'm the same, the equipment's the same. So it's really just the staff and that kind of relational side.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think both of you talked a lot about equipment and obviously opening a new location or adding team members, adding lanes requires equipment purchases. So, talk a little bit about some of your decisions of who you choose to partner with and why. Like, why do you decide to buy equipment from the people that you choose? How do you keep equipment from becoming, I'll call it, just expensive coat racks or, dust collectors in a closet? What are some of your lessons, Julia?
Yeah, great question. So I think with the first location, um, I think I went on one of those exhibits. I think I asked around. I think I asked around and see what other people were getting. And someone introduced me. Maybe there was a Vision Expo, one of those exhibitions, and I was introduced to Scott and Drew from Marco Company, and they I just love their personalities, honestly. They were just so laid back and at the same time very professional and at the same time just not pushy. I think they guided me through, they showed me the equipment, showed me how everything worked. And I also like the aesthetics of it. And because I was building this new practice and everything was new and I wanted to have that little bit of that luxury feel to it. So I really love the aesthetics. And then, I mean, as far as the magnification and all the little tools of the equipment, they pretty much very similar throughout. Um, and I just loved working with them because they answered all the questions. And it felt in that moment they would be there for me whenever I needed them. And it actually how it's been. If I ever have like a small malfunction or something, or the cord came out or something that I can't, figure it out, like I can just text them. Like I text them and then text me back within very short period of time. So I think the biggest thing is probably a support after the purchase. That's the biggest game changer. But technologies, they're all pretty good technologists throughout. But the way they're going to treat you after you purchase, that's the biggest, I think, the differentiator. So I um enjoyed working with their company so much. Then when we opened second location, it was kind of like a no-brainer to replicate. And plus honestly, I haven't had any single issue. Hopefully I don't jinx myself, but I haven't had any issues with the equipment and I honestly haven't had any issues. And And they have good covers for the equipment that are very waterproof. Because what happened a year ago on the third floor, there was a water heater that broke and it flooded. It flooded
Oh,
this beautiful space. Like everything was like flooded. And it was during Christmas break. And that was the way. And also, speaking of having an amazing team, so one of our team members, Amy, was here and she handled it so well while I was away. But that little cover is saved. None of my equipment was damaged. Not the Optimap, not the order, not the lensometer, not the slit lamp, because they had the covers on.
wow. So the reminder for everybody who has covers, put them on
You're right.
if you're
And then,
planning to get over the office. Yeah.
yeah, not sick. And who would have thought of like a water heater on the third floor? It was just, you can't even think about this. Yeah.
Interesting. David, what about you? What are your what kind of things guide your choices in who you choose to do business with when you're buying equipment, and then also when you were expanding, what are some of the choices that you made?
Yeah, I've done this both ways. So I had a couple. So initially, when I started up right out of school, I was trying to save money. I bought a few pieces of equipment that, and they weren't like, so one was a field and the other was a camera, retinal camera, and that company was not, they just hadn't been around long, and I've never seen the company since. I don't use those instruments anymore. And so I think buying from that lesson, and then I've bought a couple other pieces of equipment that were new and kind of innovative, but the company longevity wasn't there. It was kind of a startup. And I've been bitten a few times with that. So initially when I started, I bought um, I bought one lane, one Marco lane with manual phoropter, an ARK, because one of my mentors was like, "Hey, you got to buy the Marco Nidec ARK. It's dead on. You just won't have trouble with it. It works forever." And so I bought that. I think I bought 3 or 4 cents. And then I've just kind of added over time. We have 12 lanes with automated phoropters across the clinics with Marco lensometers, ARKs, now myopia, AL myopia. So all of our stuff is Marco because they're there. Kind of like Julia had said, if I text or call, they're here. I have a new rep now, but when Dave was my rep in across my locations, he'd be somewhere else, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm in, I don't know, Oklahoma," and then he'd just like show up later that day to like fix my problem. Like, it's kind of like the butler on Mr. Deeds. If you've seen that movie, just appears. So that's been great, and just through that relationship, the equipment works, right? And there are other competitors to Marco, but that's who I started with. It's who my mentor said to start with. It's who my dad's equipment was in the 80s and 90s, and so um, so it's been great. They have a great partnership with Vision Source, who I'm a part of, and so as new innovations have come along, if they have that option or opportunity to purchase through them, I just go ahead and buy it through them because I know the pricing's good. They're very fair. They help me with financing. A lot of times with those, if you're bringing in something like the AL myopia, it's still going to take, or at least for us, I've kind of realized over the years, hey, it's going to take me 3 to 6 months to get this going. When do payments start? And they're always judicious and helpful about, hey, this will start in 3 to 6 months and gives us time to get going. So I think
Yeah, you talked about that earlier.
that's a big component is having an equipment. One is the service good. Two is how's the relationship if you do have a problem, and do they, are they good with helping you get financing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and giving yourself the opportunity to build up when you buy it, right? Is part of the equation. I is kind of my last question. I wanted each of you to reflect on the difference in the way, because there's some unifying factors here, right? You're both high technology practices. You both you both use the technology in as a tool to drive better patient experience. But you both have very different ways that you approach growing a practice, and also and also just kind of your practice model. So I want to take a moment and just ask each of you to kind of reflect and see, one of the things that's fascinating, of course, is like anytime you talk to a colleague, you're like, oh, I can learn that from this person, I can learn this from that person. And I wanted to ask each of you to reflect a little bit on what are some of the differences that you noticed, and what are some of the decisions that, or maybe some of the things you want to look into a little bit more, Julia.
As you were asking this question, I had so many thoughts, and then they just yes. So let me collect myself. Speaking of equipment, I just wanted to circle back. At that time, I was also a Vision Source partner. So I think that pricing also made sense. So it's not just, the relationship and that, but also the pricing was like 30% off or something like that. It was great. Um, um, with as far as reflect back, I think like the biggest thing, right? If we are, I remember I was listening to someone who was a private practice, and then this doctor sold his practice to private equity. And he was and he stayed on board for some time, and he was just much happier that he didn't have to deal with like day to day, and then managing people and patients complaining about $10 copay and things like that. And I was just thinking to myself that um I think I actually enjoy being a business owner in a way that I am curious about figuring out like how, like, about the problem solving. Just like, so my specialty, I do a lot of binocular vision, I do a lot of prism, like stuff that not everyone likes, right? And then I get like, I think the most challenging glasses prescriptions, and yeah, when people can't figure out the prescription, they send those patients to me, and I'm able to figure it out. So I enjoy to I love being curious and think of outside of the box and figure out the problems, right? And the more challenging, the better. And I think with owning a practice, it's almost like I didn't start as a business owner. I started as a doctor only, but having that trait of loving solving the problems helped me to grow my business. Because whenever there is a challenge, like if there's got to be a solution to that, or there's got to be a root to that problem. If the patients complain about $10 copay, right, in the office, then maybe we need to address that and figure out where is this coming from. Maybe we're not communicating the copays ahead of the exam, so no surprises. And also being transparent and giving patients to make their own decisions. So if they don't want to pay this amount in your office, they don't have to come in. Then they can make that decision. So then you don't have to deal with it. So I guess the takeaway, my point here is that um, if you truly in owning your want to own your practice, you want to open this, be ready, or kind of get prepared to fall in love with the process and fall in love with solving the problems. Um, and then the second thing that comes to my mind is um, just like from my experience, right? On my example, you don't have to wait a very long time before you bring an associate in. And I think it's even maybe harder sometimes to bring an associate later on, because everyone is just so used to you and you being the only doctor there. So it's actually when you bring someone earlier on, it can work out even better. So people are not, yeah, they're not used to just seeing you, and then there's another doctor. And then that also gives you an opportunity to step out of the practice a little bit and have that time. Like what I do, right? What I've done, I stepped out, and that gave me an opportunity to look at the practice as a business and improve the systems and improve the processes. Because it's really, really hard to zoom out when you're in patient care. And I separate the days when I'm only work on my business from the days when I see the patients. Because when I'm with the patients, it's all I can think about the patients. Even if it's 4 patients a day, my whole day will be thinking about them. Like it's really hard to switch that focus. Okay, I'm going to see the patients for this hour, and then the next hour I'm going to be focusing on my, on my business. So, so yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And interesting nuggets of advice. Thank you, Julia. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I've had an opportunity to kind of go through different phases. I was at Julia's phase and then realized that I don't enjoy being a middle manager. Like I don't want to manage staff. I want to see patients and I kind of want to I want to be the CEO. And so that impetus, once I kind of realized that, I wish I would have known that like starting out, but once I got into that position and just didn't enjoy that kind of pull between patient care and then the day-to-day management of it, I realized like, okay, I got to grow. And I think two is a really and the way Julia's doing it is probably, I think she's kind of pacing it well enough, but two is hard. Three is a little easier. Four and five are probably even easier than that because you have more systems and more people to help. But I really enjoy, I'm to a point where I really enjoy the way that we're practicing. I would have done lots of things different, but I think all of those things I've learned valuable lessons. Um, but me being able to show up, I just interviewed or talked to a young OD that we're looking at bringing on and talking to, and I always disclaim to ODs like, hey, I'm not the manager. So, there we have people that take care of those problems. I think ODs do a really good job with patient care, but we oftentimes don't make great managers because instead of having those relationships with our staff and with patients on that business side, we just kind of go in and try to put out fires all the time, and it's just not the best way to run a business. And so I've been able to kind of separate that. So I think from where I am at this standpoint, I'm really enjoying patient care, and I can do it for a long time. And then it's just trying to backfill as I slow down. It's trying to backfill with great ODs. So did I answer the question?
Yeah, and just interesting. Again, interesting phases of practice, and there's some really unique similarities, and then there's also some just very different ways that each of you approach your both patient care and the strategy with which you run the practice. So, fascinating conversation. Thank you both for being on the Power Hour. I think we're out of time for today, but I think it's been really insightful, and I appreciate you both being as guests.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for having us.